Imagine you're watching your favorite team on a lovely Sunday. There's nothing better than day baseball. Crochet on the bump, you're up 3-1 in the fourth. Matt Olson steps into the box and flares the ball to left field. Jarren Duran races to that ball. He's a plus runner, reaches near his top speed of around 29.5 feet per second. He dives and he doesn't make the catch. Bummer. Maybe you're crazy enough like me to wonder what the catch probability was on that given play. Kind of feels like it was below 10%. Nice try, Duran. Let's move on in this game. So you saunter over to MLB Research or social media and find out that this was a 50-50 ball. Yes, apparently there was a 50% chance this catch was made. Preposterous, I know. This happens more than you think, so much so that prior to a discovery of mine, I had a hot take that catch probabilities on an individual play basis should be mostly banned from the internet, and we should only be allowed to look at those aggregated tables, because those aggregated tables that show, 2 months of a season always pass the sniff test. And yet I see all these 50-50 balls on social media where a guy's reaching a sprint speed in the top 10% of the league, a good jump, diving for a ball, catching it, and 50% of fielders are supposed to catch that ball. So this discovery is kind of a frustrating one, but one that I think we need to address. There's a baseball researcher and PhD candidate at Arizona State University named Vivian Pelletier who does some awesome work with public data. And she had a tweet that kind of broke the continuum of space-time, to me at least, a baseball data guy. She claimed that while we publicly are told that Duran ball had a 50% chance of being caught, she had a model that claimed it was caught about 5% of the time. That is a massive difference. And when I prodded for more information, I was vindicated to find out that this isn't a one-off thing. She had a thread that detailed a pretty large flaw in how catch probabilities we have access to are publicly modeled. Now, it's a really dense thread. There's a lot of graphs. It required me conversing with a few other people to figure out what was going on. But the ultimate takeaway is that balls with a 50% catch probability or lower are routinely underestimated in their difficulty. Put another way, the model used is expecting the play in that window of catch probability to be made way more often than it has actually been made historically. It's basically not adjusting for how often that 50-50 ball has actually been caught by the fielder, and instead is just motored on, kind of saying these balls are caught in that 50% of the time window. So let's take a look at some examples of this, and why not go to the best defender in the sport right now, P. Crow Armstrong, an MVP candidate as well, who would have thought? There's a particular kind of play that often shows up in this 30 to 50% catch probability area that we're going to talk about, and it doesn't really look spectacular, but it's often a tough play. And I think it's a great example of where a model like catch probability is valuable. Models are generally only valuable when they establish a result different from your expectation, where you learn something. And this ball PCA catches is a good example of that. I call these plays the defender got an amazing jump and ran really fast at the ball but didn't have to dive. Brad Keller on the bump, Juan Soto up, he scalds a ball to the right center gap. PCA gets a jump that's 10 feet. Jump is basically how much ground you cover in the first 3 seconds after a pitch's release. PCA is top 4 on the StatCast jump leaderboard, so he makes plays like this a lot. And on top of that jump, he maxes out near 29 feet per second sprint speed to close on this ball and make the catch, faster than about 90% of runners in the league. Looks good. I think it's a relatively tough one to put a percent on overall. StatCast catch probability goes with 35%. And now that we know they underestimate the difficulty of catches like this, we can assume it's probably something more like 25%. Now, that's not that massive of a difference, I get it, but I'll go even deeper. There's a particular kind of ball that Vivian points out as being underestimated in its difficulty, even more than our standard 10 percentage point haircut that we're going to give to most plays in that 50% catch probability band. It's when a fielder is coming directly in on a ball. We'll consider in moving around a 40-degree window relative to a perfectly straight line in front of the defender. In the case of these in balls, given a 50% catch probability, we can probably cut that about 25 percentage points, give or take. Now, this haircut is going to change based on the difficulty of the play. For example, we can't take 25 percentage points away from a ball that's caught only 20% of the time, for example. But let's see a pair of examples here to illustrate this. And we'll go back to PCA. Now, this ball has a 10% catch probability on MLB Research and a 15% catch probability on Baseball Savant's feature in their fielding tab, which kind of lets you sort through different plays made for a given season. Now, I don't know which one of these is correct, but given our new knowledge, they're both probably wrong. This play is probably more like a 5% catch probability for Pete. He got a 12-foot jump, which is crazy good. That's basically 2 full strides in the first 3 seconds after pitch release. And he had to cover 49 feet in about 3 seconds, and he absolutely nailed it. Vivian also points out this Weiler Abreu ball in that same Garrett Crochet game from the top of this video. StatCast gave this a 20% catch probability for Abreu, and it's directionally in for him as we're talking about. His angle coming in on the ball is right around 27 degrees to his left. So he needs to cover about 109 feet in 5 seconds. He got a really good jump, and he misses the play, but it's a really good attempt, super close. 20% is far too high of an estimation. Vivian's model had this more around 2%. So instead of being made once every 5 tries, it's made once every 50 tries. That is a huge difference. Now, you might be getting pretty riled up here, wanting to boycott the StatCast gods, demanding Mike Petriello and Tom Tango, who do great work for StatCast, work the next 4 weekends to figure this out for you. But the reality is the frequency of these balls in the 10 to 50% catch probability window are so low for an individual defender that even if you summed up all the error that we're looking at in this window, the reality is it wouldn't actually change the defender's grade that much. Yes, you might be realizing this is even further vindication from me in my hot take that we should banish individual catch probabilities for the most part and only look at the leaderboards. Even though the individual probabilities in this sub 50% window that we're talking about are inaccurate for the most part, when you sum it up into OAA overall, which you can find on Baseball Savant, the absolute max it affects a player is about 1 out. And the majority are more like 1/5 of an out. Hilarious, I know. This is because the sheer frequency of catch probability is heavily distributed towards more routine plays. Vivian had a part of that thread of hers breaking down the frequency of play difficulty, and it showed that there's like 40,000 plus routine plays since 2021, and maybe like 150 to 200 in this 20 to 60% catch probability window. There are just not a lot of these sub 50% balls, and even less on an individual player basis. And unfortunately, that is probably the population of balls that are highlighted the most on social media alongside catch probabilities. So we're exposed to this misleading info at a really high rate relative to its relevance to overall defender value. But it also teaches us a lesson about where defenders create their value. The outfielders that are considered bad are bad because they miss relatively easy plays at a higher rate than others. We're talking about balls here in the 80 to 99% catch probability window. Heston Kjerstad and Nick Castellanos grade as the worst outfield defenders in Major League Baseball right now. For example, here's a 95% ball for Kjerstad that he lets glance off his glove. Now, things can get pretty funky when you add in a wall, sure. I believe this is modeled into catch probabilities after the fact. So if you see a number pop up and the play's near the wall, and then it goes down the next day when you check again, it's likely a byproduct of a wall adjustment. But all things considered, his route looks pretty terrible, and he's an average runner, which prevents much of his ability to make up for the poor route efficiency on this play. And this ball is also pulled by Mike Tauchman, where the spin is a bit more true, so I'm not sure you can make the slicing excuse for a batted ball here. Maybe the wind played a part? Castellanos has missed some pretty bad plays this year as well. This ball had a 99% catch probability for him, and instead of making the play, he kind of just allowed Rojas to dive for it unsuccessfully and bailed pretty early. Or this one, which had a 95% catch probability for him, and he has to dive and he lets it glance off his glove. This area is where most outfielders end up going negative or slightly positive. High catch probability balls or routine plays is where you make the bulk of your money as an outfield defender or lose that money. That is, unless you're Denzel Clark. While those 50-50 balls per StatCast's model are pretty uncommon, it seems like the absolute god-tier defenders make these plays at a pretty high rate relative to more average or even below average defenders. And as of June 6th, Denzel Clark had only played 14 Major League Baseball games. But this guy's gone 7 for 7 in our 50% catch probability area. He's actually caught every single ball that's been hit to him that even registered on catch probability per his OAA distribution chart, aside from 2 of them, one of which would have been an absolutely bananas catch for a fielder who literally has never played a game in Toronto before this. And it seemed like it was in his glove before popping out as he got bodied by the wall. The other one here he pulled up on in an 11-0 game, and it still had a 5% catch probability, so basically an impossible play, but if I had to put my money on it, if this game was tied, he would have dove and caught it. This ability to convert some of these 50% catch probability plays and also just be provided with an opportunity to make this many plays in that window has vaulted him inside the top 10 on our OAA leaderboard, despite the incredibly small sample of innings he's actually been out on the field. Clark has been out there for just over 100 innings in center field and has 6 outs above average. For comparison, Michael Harris has been out there for about 550 innings and has the same outs above average. Now, we probably can't prorate what Clark has done over 500 innings and say he's the greatest outfielder to ever walk this earth, mainly because he probably won't keep getting this number of 50-50 balls or so that he's able to convert on, but regardless, he's pretty special, and I hope he can hit enough to stay on the Athletics MLB squad. And I gotta bring up before we get out of here this Clark play, which is absolutely bananas. Now, I can't find the catch probability for this one on MLB Research or anything, but Dallas Braden says it was 25%, which he must have gotten from somewhere, so let's believe him. And of course, given that you're now schooled in the ways of correcting catch probabilities, we know this was surely lower than 25%. And Vivian's model had it just under 6%. So I hope you learned a few things in this video. Number 1, you know to adjust catch probabilities that you see publicly in the 10 to 50% window or so. Number 2, you know if a guy's directly coming in on a ball in our 40-degree window, it's probably being undersold even more in its difficulty. And number 3 here, you also know that the OAA leaderboards for outfielders in particular are still pretty good encapsulations of who the best defenders in baseball are. See, these 10 to 50% balls just don't happen enough for them to have a massive impact on a player, unless you're Denzel Clark, who's been really fun to watch this season. So I hope you enjoyed this video. This is my 3rd one for Stark Raving Sports. Feel free to check out my channel, my Substack as well. I do some cool work there. I hope you enjoy this one. I'll be in the comments if you have any questions or concerns, and take care.